You swallowed what? Tell me again how you fell on something. Good story, bro. As you figured out, we are going to be talking about things that get incidentally ingested, inserted, and basically put in places that things probably shouldn't go. You're asking yourself, what could she possibly do with a makeup look like that? It's gonna be random. We're gonna do blue and green just because I felt like it. Last time we talked about surgical, unintentional, retained foreign bodies. The object was not designed to go into the body. In fact, the patient usually has no idea that it's left in there until they start having symptoms. This time around, we're talking about people who intentionally put things into their bodies. So I don't want to dog it too much. I really don't. Because a lot of underlying psychiatric disorders associated with people who put things into their bodies, whether it's like swallowing them, whether it's putting it up their rectum, whether they put it up into their urethra. So it's not exactly what you might think it is. And we would never on this channel dog somebody for having a psychiatric disorder. Just not gonna do it. So actually, one of the medical terms that is used for people who ingest things or stick things up into other places is called a polyembolopilomania. I cannot believe I just said that on the first try. Can't say sponge very well or very easily, but I can say that word. Totally makes sense. So some patients will have a hard time knowing whether or not it was intentional or not. These are usually people who, let me adjust the camera, you keep falling. These are people who usually have a history of doing this. By the way, for today's look, we're going to be using Colourpop's Fade into Hue palette. I've used this a couple of times. I really like the brightness and the colors. Now, just so you know, pastel colors can be very difficult to make as far as eyeshadows. So when you find a company that does really pigmented, pale shadows, it's pretty unique. So we're gonna start with kind of a neutral kind of transition color because we're gonna do blues and greens. So we're gonna start with this, what is it called? Take It Easel right here. It's just like a very pale blue. And because I don't have a brush that's clean that I can do a regular transition color with, we're just gonna go with this kind of interesting flat, thick one and just see how we do. And just starting in the corners, after we put our base on, I'm just going to start buffing it in. And that'll be kind of like our color that we buff everything else into. When you start doing colors like this and start doing really heavy color work, you need to take your time, build the color, and blend and blend and blend. Give yourself time to do it. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, the accidents are obviously just children, right? Well, in a sense, yeah, you're kind of correct. So 80% will be kids putting all kinds of random things into their mouths, into their nose, into their ears, into their buttholes, like everything you could imagine. While we laugh about it now, it can be very serious. But you know, kids, that's how they learn, that's how they explore. And we just have to keep a close eye on them so they don't do something really terrible and swallow something extremely dangerous. So the other 20% that will end up seeking help because they've ingested or inserted something that they shouldn't have. It's usually a mixture of a psychiatric disorder plus substance abuse plus or minus maybe a fetish disorder, also a paraphilia, if you will. They can be very difficult to diagnose, especially when you don't have a health system that has like the experts nearby that can really see it for what it is, not just some person who wanders in off the street and says,
"Dude, I stuck a pen up my pee-pee." Yeah.
What are you going to do with that? You know, most people are going to react in a way that seems fitting for our society, which is to laugh and cause all sorts of problems. But in reality, it's probably kind of a cry for help. There's another kind that we won't talk about today, and that is the body packers. That is a very real situation in our country today in the war on drugs. These people act as basically, they're called mules. They are stuffed with heroin and cocaine and other drugs. They put them in balloons and make people swallow them, and then they come across the border from wherever. And those people's lives are at great risk. When they come to the ER, it is a medical emergency. If it bursts, they become toxic and die. It's horrible. So we're gonna take the color Watermark because it's blue and sparkly, and I love it. It's so pretty. How could anyone not love it? And you're just gonna kind of dab on the outside here. I know it looks a little shocking. It's a little scary. You're just gonna kind of dab here in the corner. And then we're just gonna kind of slowly build it up into a shape that works for your eye. So for me, I'm gonna go up this way just a little bit, and then I'm gonna kind of go around, and I'm gonna kind of go down. And then we'll come back in with our other color over in here. But in the meantime, we will blend and chat. God, it reminds me of, remember the movie Legally Blonde, where she's like the bend and snap? God, I miss those days. There's a huge list of reasons why and causes why people do these kind of things, right? Then there are some listed in the nicest way possible. These are people who made some choices and they weren't great ones. Grandma would not be pleased. My favorite two out of all of the different diagnoses associated with this was actually indirect injury as a result of impaired judgment. That sounds like Saturday night. Am I right? Am I right? And the other one, just, I had to laugh. I had to laugh because this was probably the doctor or provider who's in the ER late at night and is trying to be nice while everybody else is being a dick. Why did he put that up there? This doctor called it exploratory misadventure. I like that. I mean, usually exploratory misadventure for me personally is when I'm trying to find a restaurant that's maybe 10 miles from my house and I have no sense of direction. It's usually not inserting things of dubious character in places that they shouldn't be. Okay. But you know, everybody's got their own idea of what an adventure might entail on a Friday or Saturday night or a Monday. Who am I? It's been noted in the literature for well over 100 years of these exploratory misadventures. 1919 was the actual first rectal insertion that was noted by a doctor, and that was a glass bottle, unfortunately, for that person. That's dangerous, people. Don't use glass. Don't. That's a bad plan. I'm just gonna try to soften some of this because it's a little more intense over here, trying to get it to equal over here. So interestingly, the male to female ratio is 37:1. So that means for every female that might do this, there's 37 males complete it and do it, which I found really interesting. I wasn't able to find I couldn't find any information about any study that compared them. Like, were they the same objects? Did they have any kind of pattern or correlation? Is there a reason why men were more likely? Or is it kind of one of those, subjects people don't really talk about, but kind of wonder, like me? All right, so let's talk about the pee-pee hole. How about first? Seems legit, comes first. Urology, they always get the shaft. I'm gonna try really hard not to do a bunch of penis references, but I cannot contain myself. I'm sorry. So I have this Hipdot palette, and I'm gonna take the color Goddess because it is beautiful. And I'm gonna take the same brush because I'm lazy. I'm just taking a little bit. Maybe I should have done a yellow look for pee-pee, possibly. But well. So as far as people putting things up their pee-pee hole, their urethra, it goes back to 1897 was one of the first documented. And actually that year, 221 cases were reported, just in the urethra alone, which I thought was interesting. It's like there wasn't much of anything, then boom, somebody decided we should keep track of this. There's something in the water, Jimmy, there's something in the water. We gotta keep track of this. People putting things up there. Why don't you go put some lead in your pencil? I have a pen pal. Well, what are they putting up there, you ask, nicely and with a curious nature? They're putting in wires, pencils, pens, sometimes documented that the pen still does work afterwards. Fair. There's also, they put up batteries, wires. There's even one reference that I really had a hard time with, which was one guy put a fork up there. I'm just curious as to how he was able to do that without feeling some sort of panic or impending doom, it has been my experience that men are very particular about their member. It can be very sensitive, right? So there is something to the fact that there are sensitive areas inside the urethra. There's sensitive nerves all up and down that channel. When you insert something in there, occasionally you can hit those zones. The problem is that people aren't smart about it. They don't give it a goog. They don't think about the consequences of doing said action, and it could end very poorly. So all I did was just darken the outer corners here just a little bit because we're gonna try to create some gradients here with what we've got. I need a smaller brush. Where are my small brushes? So I'm gonna try to take this color Rain that's up here. It's kind of a silvery blue, and I'm gonna put it in the corners and see how we do. So as I'm doing research for this cute little topic we're talking about today, I stumbled across something that I didn't know was a thing. And then I had to go down that rabbit hole. Because, you're not going to know unless you look it up. Speaking of looking things up, y'all remember Encyclopedia Britannicas? Where did all of those go? Don't you wonder that? Think about how many children libraries across the country, school libraries, had huge sets, multiple sets of these in their school library. Where did they go after the computers and Goog took over? Where did they go? Is somebody wiping their butt with them? I don't know. These are questions I need answered. So basically, I'm just gonna go back and forth between the colors until I kind of get the gradient that I'm looking for. So as I'm researching, I came across a term that I had no idea what it meant. And when I looked it up in the dictionary, it told me I was using a bad word. So I was like, well, that's clearly not where I need to go with this. The term is sounding. Sounds normal enough, I guess, right? It sounds pretty normal, right? It doesn't seem like anything too crazy. The whole idea is a nicer sounding name for putting things up your urethra for pleasure. I had to ask my friend, who's a urologist, what he thought. Because I'm like, what? I have my own opinions. Maybe I'm totally off track. And he kind of gave me a non-response, which is totally understandable. There are two sides to this, right? On the first side, it's dangerous. You risk perforating the structures in the shaft, basically giving yourself the shaft. You risk perforating your bladder, and you risk just basic damage all along that highway. You also risk, if it's not clean, you risk a major infection, which a lot of infections out there that a lot of antibiotics are not covering these days. They have evolved. But at the same time, you also have to think about sexual pleasure is a very real part of a person's identity. I don't know, you guys do what you want, but make sure it's clean. Make sure you clean yourself. Make sure your partner clean. I would go against any kind of sharp objects. I think that's kind of probably a no-brainer. Sometimes men's brains are elsewhere. I can't not. Come on. Let's talk about batteries. Let's get away from the urethra for a hot second and talk about people ingesting things. Now, over the years, I have seen so many different things that people have swallowed. I've seen people swallow razor blades. I've seen people swallow tons and tons of batteries and pencils and spoons and just regular everyday items that have no business being in there and can cause some serious damage. But one of the biggest ones out there, whether accident or not, is batteries. The biggest culprit, there's like 4,000 incidences per year. 4,000. Can you imagine? That's a lot. That's crazy talk right there, is what it is. So most of the time, obviously, it's going to be an accident due to two sides of the spectrum. You've got little kids who think it's candy, and so they eat it. And then you also have elderly population that has dementia. They ingest it somehow. So you have to know that if it's a button battery, more than likely that's going to be one of the cases. It's people who ingest objects. It's interesting that they choose different objects. Like button batteries are not high on the list of things that they ingest. Please hold while I put on my lashes. Okay, I just used halvesies because this look is already a little extra. So I did think it was interesting that button batteries actually cause the most damage. Looking at the data, they're way deadlier than cylindrical batteries are. So a little refresher, how the battery works. Here's the quick and the dirty. So you've got a positive end and a negative end. On one end is the terminal part, which has lithium usually, lithium batteries. And then the other side of the terminal has like a mixture. And it could be anything from like more lithium to silver oxide, manganese dioxide, lithium manganese. And then the negative side has the narrowest portion of it. And so when the electrical current flows, that's kind of where it comes out. And if it's in the human body, it can cause electrical currents going against the mucosa, wherever it is in the GI tract. So if you think about it, it's still causing an electrical current. And by the way, a dead battery always still has a little bit left in it to keep on going. You know, lithium batteries are more common just because manufacturers prefer them. It's a little bit, they maintain their charge longer, they're lighter, you know, like all the things consumers want, right? So a battery, anything larger than like 12 millimeters is a huge risk, huge, for getting lodged. And you never want it to be lodged. Best case scenario is that, you know, it travels along your GI tract and it exits the usual way things exit in your GI tract, right? Well, it gets a little messier when it's become large. So that means that it has a risk of rupture, and then you're leaking battery acid and all kinds of horrible chemicals. And then the other is that it comes up against the side of the GI tract, and that delicate tissue starts getting fried because it's basically almost like a suction because of the electrical current. It's horrible. So when this happened, you know, usually time is of the essence. So you've got about 2 hours, sometimes less, depending on how many and where it's traveled and, you know, how fast the GI tract is moving that day. You have about 2 hours after ingestion to get to the hospital and start removing it before it really starts causing damage. If you think that your kid has ingested something, it's probably a great idea to get your booty moving and out the door to the hospital. You know, by the time the battery hits the intestines, the damage has already been done and then just continues, but it does slow down a little bit, mostly because the pH is different in the intestines than it is in the stomach. Just correcting a little bit of my rosé bottle of wine that occurred last night. By the way, the states with the biggest problems, ready? California, okay, they have a large population. Texas, okay, Texas, large state. And Florida, because Florida. Okay, so last but not least, we gotta talk about things that people put up their butt. Why do they do it? Again, similar reasons as discussed. When you ask a nurse or anyone really who works in healthcare what is the craziest thing they've seen go up into the human rectum, they will tell you. It never ceases to amaze me, the kind of things that people have seen. I'm always amazed by the imagination in making choices, by the kinds of things we do to our bodies, aka things we put up our bodies. So just by asking around, you know, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen? For me personally, I've seen pens, I've seen shower hooks, I've seen shampoo bottles. Some have seen light bulbs. One person said there was an incident of a pool noodle. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around that. And the pool noodle now will be forever changed. You have me to thank for that. You're welcome. People talk about normal items like markers and paintbrushes and, you know, thermometers, turkey basters. That used to be the joke at Thanksgiving, right? Or was that just me? Oh, okay. Toothbrushes. Some of the weirder stuff was like vacuum hose. And my favorite one was reading about somebody who put a trailer hitch where the sun don't shine. That was an interesting camping trip. And of course, you've got your variety of fruits and vegetables of various shapes and sizes. That one is worldwide, friends. Really really the only rational item that I saw, rational explanation, was, you know, some elders used it as a way to try to relieve constipation in some journal reports. I think even then, you gotta kind of chalk that one up to psychiatric issues. I will say that I wish people would realize that you should just tell the truth when you come in, when you realize that you've put something in too far. That's all. So I wish people would realize that just say, hey, I was experimenting a little bit on my Saturday night and things got a little out of hand, like literally out of hand. Don't tell me that you fell on it. Don't tell me that somebody tripped you and you fell on it. Nobody believes that story, okay? Nobody in medicine believes that. Guess who's the most likely character? Men between the ages of 20 and 30, it says in the literature. I was kind of blown away by it. I'm like, really? Are we sure? Hey, who am I to judge? I tripped and fell, and the garden hose somehow went up my butt. I tripped and fell, and the marker just disappeared. I tripped and fell, and the trailer hitch disappeared. It seems legit. So the real question is, can you die from this? It's not necessarily that you would die from that. It's the complications. So technically, you could die from perforating your bladder, bowel, various things like that if you're using sharp objects. So in theory, yes. And I actually kind of looked around in the scientific literature to see if I could find instances where that like actually happened. And I found some other interesting things instead. Of course. Vaginal insertion of a carrot causing an air embolism. These are true stories. I can't make this up, y'all. There's the urethral insertion causing your entire belly to become inflamed and creating a huge hole in your bladder. That was from a lead pencil. He put lead in his pencil. The rectal insertion, this is my favorite, of a shoehorn. Remember shoehorns? Causing a rectum canal perforation and subsequent hemorrhage. Why? Why didn't they give it a go first? Maybe look it up in Encyclopedia Britannica. I wonder these things. Got a clean brush? No, because you need to wash all of them. Brush them, brush them, brush them. Well, I'm just gonna lightly tap and try to not make this a crazy under eye. It's too late. I think I've done enough. Just to make things interesting, I'm gonna use kind of a violet or lilac waterline color. My goal isn't to make it stand out as much as it is trying to complement the other colors and make them stand out. So what do you guys think? Are you part of the crowd that believes it's a mental health disorder? Or do you guys think that it's just people being stupid? That was a misadventure. Good job, guys. Oh my God. Oh, so pretty. I'm going a little overboard. Can't help myself. I still like the original cause for the diagnosis. Oh, exploratory misadventure. It's my favorite. Well, we decided to go camping this weekend and somehow the trailer hitch ended up in my butthole. Happens, ma'am. Yeah, the trailer hitch has to be my favorite. Had to have been. Exploratory misadventure. That's it for me today, you guys. I hope you had a lot of fun talking about some really kind of interesting topics today. Things that went where the sun don't shine. Choices were made. Some of them were just misadventure. Some of them a little more intentional. Either way, we chatted about it and had some fun. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.